The soft light of the September sunset painted the Providence, Rhode Island sky with shades of amber and pink, as Alice Winters nervously adjusted the strap of her navy blue dress. At 24, she rarely went out partying, preferring to devote her evenings to studying child psychology and working at the local library. But Madeline, her best friend since high school, had insisted so much that she couldn't refuse. "You need to live a little, Alice." Madeline's words echoed in her mind as she climbed the steps of the imposing Harrison mansion, where the charity party was being held. The place was stunning, with its white columns and meticulously tended gardens, so different from the modest apartment where she lived. The interior of the mansion was buzzing with Providence's elite. Women in designer dresses and men in impeccable suits circulated in the main hall, their laughter mingling with the soft music that filled the room. Alice immediately felt out of place, like a crumpled page in the middle of a perfectly bound book. "Alice, you've come!" Madeline appeared in a dazzling red dress, her blonde hair perfectly groomed. "Come, I want to introduce you to some people." Before she could protest, Alice was dragged through the hall, being introduced to several faces she knew she wouldn't remember the next day. That's when her eyes met his for the first time. Ricardo Delgado was talking to a group of businessmen, his black suit contrasting with his impeccable white shirt. There was something in his gaze that intrigued her, a mixture of power and gentleness that seemed out of place in that ostentatious environment. "That's Ricardo Delgado," whispered Madeline, noticing Alice's interest. "Heir to Delgado Industries. They say he's just come back from London after closing $1 million deal." Alice nodded distractedly, trying not to stare too obviously. To her surprise, Ricardo looked in her direction and smiled, a gesture that made her heart race inexplicably. The evening progressed with a series of superficial conversations and colorful drinks that the waiters served on silver trays. Alice stood near the bar watching the party from a safe distance until a deep voice surprised her. "You're not having much fun, are you?" Ricardo had approached without her noticing, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Is it that obvious?" Alice smiled shyly, accepting the glass he offered. "Let's just say you look as uncomfortable as I do on these occasions," he replied, leaning against the bar next to her. "Ricardo Delgado, Alice Winters," she replied, noticing how his brown eyes looked even more intense up close. The conversation flowed naturally, surprising Alice. Ricardo was different from the other men at the party. There was an authenticity in his words, a genuine interest in his questions about his work in the library and his studies. It was during this conversation that she noticed the first dizziness, subtle at first, like a slight imbalance. Alice attributed it to the champagne, but something in her gut screamed that something was wrong. "Are you all right?" Ricardo's voice sounded distant now, as if coming through a tunnel. I don't know," Alice mumbled, her words beginning to slur. "I feel strange." The world began to spin, the lights in the hall turning into golden blurs. Alice felt hands holding her, voices arguing around her. The last thing she registered clearly was Ricardo's worried face being pushed aside by other figures she couldn't recognize. "Someone call an ambulance." Ricardo's voice sounded desperate, but it was being drowned out by other voices. "Don't worry, we'll take care of her." A female voice, familiar but unrecognizable in its state of confusion. The memories that followed were hazy fragments. A dark room, whispering voices, the sound of a door closing. Alice struggled to stay conscious, but it was like trying to hold water with her hands. The harder she tried, the further she slipped into darkness. When she finally woke up, 3 days had passed. He was in an unfamiliar room, his clothes changed, his body aching. His cell phone showed dozens of missed calls from his parents, but none from Madeline or any of his other friends from the party. The following weeks were a blur of shame and confusion. No one talked about that night. Madeline stopped answering her calls. The few who still spoke to her treated it as a misunderstanding, suggesting that she had overdrunk. 2 months later, sitting alone in a medical clinic, Alice stared at a positive pregnancy test, silent tears streaming down her face. The nurse, with a compassionate look on her face, held up the ultrasound result. "Congratulations, Miss Winters. There are triplets." Alice's world, which was already in pieces, completely fell apart at that moment. But in the midst of her despair, something inside her grew stronger. Those 3 little lives now depended on her, and through them, she would find the strength to go on. That night, sitting in her small apartment, Alice made a decision. Providence was no longer her home. With the few savings she had, she would buy a ticket to Denver, Colorado. A fresh start, away from the judgmental stares and ghosts of the night that changed everything. "It'll just be the four of us against the world," she whispered, stroking her still flat belly. "And that will be more than enough." Winter in Denver was unlike anything Alice had ever experienced in Providence. Snow covered the Rocky Mountains like a blanket of white, creating a landscape that looked like something out of a postcard. In her small apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, she watched the snowflakes falling through the fogged-up window, a cup of chamomile tea cooling between her hands. 3 years had passed since that fateful night. The clock on the wall read 5:30 a.m., and Alice had already been awake for an hour, preparing for another day of battle. The soft sound of breathing coming from the next room made her smile. Her little miracles were still asleep. "Mommy?" a sleepy little voice called out. Luna, the oldest of the triplets by exactly 2 minutes, appeared in the kitchen doorway dragging her favorite blanket. "Good morning, my love," Alice whispered, opening her arms to welcome her daughter. "You're up early today." Luna snuggled into her mother's lap, her dark curls tousled by sleep. "I dreamt of dancing stars," murmured the little girl, already dozing off again. Alice hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the familiar tightness in her chest. Luna, Aurora, and Phoenix were her anchor, her reason to keep fighting. Each of them had a unique personality. Luna, the dreamer, Aurora, the protector, and Phoenix, the curious one. The apartment began to come alive as the first rays of sunlight penetrated through the windows. Aurora was the next to wake up, always preoccupied with helping her mother with breakfast. Phoenix was still asleep, curled up in his bed like a little cocoon. "Mom, can I help with the toast?" Aurora asked, already dragging her little chair closer to the counter. "Of course, my angel. Just watch out for her. With the hot corners, I know," Aurora added, proud of her responsibility. The morning routine was a well-rehearsed dance. Alice prepared the lunch boxes while the children had their coffee, always telling stories to keep them entertained. Today would be particularly challenging. Her shift at the cafeteria started at 7 a.m., and then she still had her job at the bookstore in the afternoon. "Mrs. Martinez is picking you up from daycare today," Alice explained as she helped Phoenix put on her shoes. "Mom has to work late." "But today is story day," protested Phoenix, his brown eyes, so similar to those of the father he had never met, shining with disappointment. "I promise to read 2 stories tomorrow," Alice assured him, feeling the familiar weight of guilt. Since moving to Denver, balancing work and motherhood had been a constant struggle. Mrs. Martinez, a Mexican lady who lived downstairs, had become a blessing in her life. She looked after the children when Alice needed to work overtime, often refusing payment, insisting that the sound of children's laughter was reward enough. On the way to nursery school, Alice watched her children jumping over puddles of melting snow, their colorful caps bobbing with every movement. Each smile was a small victory over the dark night that had brought them into the world. The day at the cafe dragged on between coffee orders and superficial conversations with regular customers. Alice had learned to construct a mask of normality, smiling and nodding as her mind wandered to her responsibilities. Bills to pay, food to buy, dreams to postpone. "Alice, can you stay late today?" asked her supervisor, interrupting her thoughts. Melissa called in sick. "I'm sorry, I can't. I have to pick up the children and—" "The children always come first, don't they?" His tone was slightly accusatory, making Alice swallow. "Yes, always," she replied firmly, although inside she was trembling at the thought of losing yet another job. In the bookshop, among the dusty shelves of used books, Alice found moments of peace. The smell of old pages and the quietness of the place reminded her of her previous life, when she worked in the Providence Library and dreamed of becoming a child psychologist. "Someday," she murmured to herself as she organized a pile of novels, "I'll go back to school. For them." At night, after the children had finally gone to sleep, Alice allowed herself a few moments of vulnerability. Sitting on the small, worn-out sofa, she leafed through a photo album, documenting the triplets' growth. Each page was a testament to her strength, but also a painful reminder of what she had lost. One photo in particular always caught her eye: the 3 newborns in hospital, so small and fragile. That day, alone in the hospital room, she had vowed that her children would never know the truth about her conception. They deserved a better story, a more dignified start. The distant sound of a siren brought her back to the present. Alice closed the album and walked to the window, watching the city lights. Denver had become her refuge, a place where no one knew her past or judged her choices. But sometimes, on the quietest nights, she wondered if she would ever really escape the shadows of that night in Providence. One day at a time, she whispered to her reflection in the glass, repeating the mantra that kept her going. Just one more day at a time. In the next room, her children slept peacefully, oblivious to their mother's sacrifices and daily battles. To them, Alice was simply Mommy, strong, loving, and always there. And for now, that was all that mattered. Saturday morning dawned with a soft mist covering the streets of Denver. Alice woke up before the alarm clock, as she always did on weekends, the only days when she could devote herself fully to the triplets. The calendar on the kitchen wall marked a special date. The children's third birthday was just a week away. While preparing chocolate chip pancakes, a Saturday tradition, Alice reflected on how each of her children had developed such distinct personalities, even though they shared the same DNA. Phoenix was the first to appear in the kitchen, his brown eyes shining as he smelled the sweet aroma in the air. "Mom, can I help you make the shapes?" he asked, already dragging his chair closer to the stove. "Of course, my scientist." Alice smiled, remembering how her son always turned breakfast into an experiment. Phoenix had an insatiable curiosity, always wondering how things worked, from the blender to the clouds in the sky. Aurora arrived soon after, carrying her inseparable toy first aid bag. "Phoenix, you forgot your socks. You'll catch cold," warned the little girl, her protective nature showing from the earliest hours of the day. "But it's hot," protested Phoenix, even though she knew her sister wouldn't rest until she saw him properly dressed. Luna was the last to appear, still hugging her sketchbook. Her eyes seemed distant, lost in some imaginary world that only she could see. "Mommy, I dreamt we were flying over a rainbow," she said softly, taking a seat at the table. Alice watched the interaction between the three of them with a mixture of love and admiration. Luna, the dreamer, always with fantastic stories to tell. Aurora, the guardian, concerned about everyone's well-being. And Phoenix, the explorer, determined to uncover all the mysteries of the world. "Are we going to the park today?" Aurora asked, already arranging the dishes on the table with surprising precision for a child her age. "Yes, but first we have a special mission," Alice replied, putting the last pancake on the plate. "We need to choose the themes for your birthday party." The children's eyes lit up at the mention of the party. It was a modest event. Alice had saved up for months to make it happen, but for the triplets, it would be magical. "I want an astronaut party," Phoenix exclaimed immediately. "I want fairies and unicorns," Luna whispered, absent-mindedly drawing on her napkin. "Can it be hospital ones?" Aurora asked, surprising Alice. "So I can take care of everyone," Alice laughed, wondering how she would combine three such different themes. But that's how it worked with the triplets. Each one unique, each one special in their own way. After breakfast, while the children were getting ready to go to the park, Alice found a moment to organize the most recent photos in her special album. Each page told a story. Luna's first tooth, Phoenix discovering how to tie her shoes, Aurora looking after her siblings during a cold. One photo in particular caught her eye, the three of them sleeping together on the sofa after a busy day. In that image, it was impossible not to notice the similarities between them, and she quickly pushed the thought away. Some memories were best kept locked away. In Washington Park, children were running free under the autumn sun. Alice watched them from a nearby bench, her heart overflowing with love and concern. Phoenix had found a small ant colony and was totally absorbed in observing it. Aurora organized a makeshift clinic to treat injured dolls and bears, while Luna chatted with her imaginary friends under a tree. "Your children are adorable," commented a lady passing by with her dog. "It must be a challenge to raise three of the same age." "It's a daily adventure," Alice replied with a sincere smile. "But every moment is worth it." Back in the apartment, while preparing lunch, Alice listened to the children playing in their room. Aurora had transformed the space into a hospital, with Phoenix serving as a reluctant patient and Luna as a fairy nurse. "Dr. Aurora, the patient needs more magic Band-Aids," Luna announced solemnly. "But I'm already covered in Band-Aids," protested Phoenix. "Quiet, a doctor knows what she's doing," Aurora replied with all the seriousness of her almost 3 years. Alice smiled, remembering her own childhood. How different the circumstances were now. Her as a single mother, struggling to give her children everything they needed. But there was a special strength in her little family, a bond that no adversity could break. At night, after telling 3 different stories, one for each taste, Alice sat on the edge of Luna's bed watching her little ones sleep. Phoenix hugged her dinosaur book. Aurora still held her toy stethoscope, and Luna smiled in her sleep, probably dreaming of her magical worlds. "You are my greatest victory," whispered Alice, smoothing out the blankets. "My little miracles." Before retiring, she stopped in front of the bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. At 27, her face showed subtle signs of fatigue, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. For her children, she would face any challenge, overcome any obstacle. One day, she promised herself, they will be proud of their mother's strength. The soft sound of the children's breathing filled the apartment like a sweet melody, reminding Alice that, despite all the difficulties, she had created something extraordinarily beautiful out of a dark night. Her 3 little miracles were living proof that sometimes the greatest blessings come from the darkest moments. Autumn painted the streets of Denver in golden hues as Alice crossed the 16th Street Mall, balancing shopping bags for the Triplets' birthday party. The cool wind fluttered her light jacket as she mentally checked off her to-do list. She still needed to order the cake, buy more decorations, and her thoughts were abruptly interrupted when she collided with someone. The bags slipped out of her hands, scattering their contents all over the sidewalk. "I'm sorry. I should have paid more attention," a familiar male voice said, crouching down to help her collect the items. The world seemed to freeze as Alice looked up. There, less than a meter away, was Ricardo Delgado. 3 years had passed, but he still looked strikingly similar to her memories of that night. The same intense brown eyes, the same elegant bearing, although now his features carried a weight that hadn't existed before. "Alice?" His voice faltered slightly as he recognized her. "Alice Winters?" She felt her heart race, a whirlwind of emotions running through her body. Fear, anger, confusion, all mixed with an inexplicable sense of destiny. "Ricardo?" she managed to say, her voice firmer than she expected. "What a coincidence." He held a package of colorful balloons in his hands, clearly part of her purchases. His eyes roamed over the other items scattered around. Party decorations, small children's gifts. "Are you living in Denver?" he asked, trying to keep his composure, although his discomfort was visible. "Yes, for almost 3 years now," Alice replied, quickly collecting the last few items. She needed to get out of there before— "Mommy!" 3 children's voices sounded simultaneously. Alice closed her eyes for a moment, her heart sinking. Mrs. Martinez was approaching with the triplets, returning from the walk in the park she had promised to take with them. Ricardo froze at the sight of the children. His gaze alternated between Alice and the 3 little ones, who were now running towards their mother. It was impossible not to notice. Phoenix had the same eyes, Aurora had her determined expression, and Luna was a perfect miniature of Alice, except for her smile, which was undeniably the same as his. Are they your children?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Yes," Alice replied dryly, pulling the children close to her instinctively. "Mrs. Martinez, could you take them for a hot chocolate? I need to sort something out here." The lady nodded, sensing the tension in the air, and gently led the triplets to the nearby coffee shop, promising them extra marshmallows. When they were alone, silence hung between them like an invisible wall. "How old are they?" Ricardo asked, although his tone indicated that he already knew the answer. "They'll be 3 next week," Alice replied, carefully watching his reaction. Ricardo staggered slightly, leaning on a nearby post. 3 years? After that night at the Harrisons' party? "Exactly. Alice, He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture. "I tried to find you after that night. When I realized something was wrong, I tried to stop it, but what, Ricardo?" Alice interrupted, years of unanswered questions overflowing in her voice. "Where were you when I woke up alone in that room? Where were you when I found out I was pregnant and everyone turned their backs on me?" "I didn't know," he replied, his voice laden with regret. "Madeline said you'd left of your own free will, that everything was fine. When I found out it was a lie, you'd already disappeared." Alice laughed bitterly. "Madeline? The same one who stopped answering my calls? How convenient. You have to listen to me." Ricardo took a step towards her. "There are things about that night that you need to know. People who planned— "No," Alice cut him off firmly. "I don't want to know. I've built a new life here, Ricardo. My children are happy and safe, and that's how it's going to stay." "Your children?" He emphasized the word. "Or our children." The comment hit Alice like a punch. "Don't you dare," she whispered. "You lost that right 3 years ago. I have the right to know if I'm a father, Alice. Ricardo insisted, his voice softer now. And if it's true, I have the right to be part of their lives. Alice felt tears threatening to fall but held them back. I don't know if you're the father, Ricardo. I only have fragments of memory of that night, and frankly it doesn't matter. They're my children, only mine. Ricardo took a business card out of his pocket and held it out to her. I'm staying at the Brown Palace Hotel. Please let me at least explain what I found out about that night. You deserve to know the truth. Alice looked at the card for a long moment before taking it. No promises. That's all I ask, he replied softly. A chance to make things right. As Alice walked away towards the coffee shop, she felt the weight of the card in her pocket as if it were made of lead. Through the window, she could see her children laughing, covered in whipped cream, completely oblivious to the encounter that had just changed everything. Mom, look! We made whipped cream mustaches, Phoenix exclaimed when she walked in. Alice forced a smile and sat down next to them. As she wiped Aurora's face with a napkin, her mind wandered to the card in her pocket and the choices she would have to make. The life she had so carefully constructed was about to change, and this time, there was no escaping the past that had finally caught up with her. Room 8 and 12 of the Brown Palace Hotel intimidated Alice as she stared at the dark wooden door. She had spent the previous night in bed, debating whether to go to the meeting Ricardo had suggested. Now, at 2 p.m. on a foggy Tuesday, her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the simple blazer she had chosen for the occasion. Mrs. Winters? The hotel receptionist had escorted her to the floor. Mr. Delgado is waiting for you in the suite. Alice took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The next few seconds seemed eternal until Ricardo opened it, wearing a casual gray sweater that made him look less intimidating than his usual business suit. You've come, he said, a mixture of relief and nervousness in his voice. Please come in. The suite was elegant, with large windows offering a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains. On the coffee table, a tea service waited, along with a brown folder that caught Alice's eye. I thought you liked chamomile tea, Ricardo commented, indicating the armchair for her. Is that still your preference? How do you? Alice frowned. From the party. You ordered chamomile tea at the bar, something unusual for a party of that kind. That's what first made me notice you. Alice sat rigidly, keeping her distance. I didn't come here to reminisce, Ricardo. You said you had information about that night. Ricardo nodded, his countenance becoming serious. He picked up his brown briefcase and sat down in the opposite armchair. Over the last 3 years, I've hired private investigators to find out what really happened at that party. What I discovered. He paused, choosing his words. It's much worse than we imagined. He opened his briefcase and began pulling out photographs and documents. First, I need you to know that I was also a victim that night. When I realized something was wrong with you, I tried to intervene, but I was stopped. Stopped how? Alice asked, her voice barely masking her distrust. Ricardo held out an old photograph. In it, a group of young people were smiling in front of a family mansion, the Harrison house. Do you recognize anyone besides Madeline? Alice examined the picture, her eyes lingering on a particular figure. Cassandra Delgado, your sister? Exactly, Ricardo confirmed, his expression hardening. Cassandra and Madeline were best friends in college, and they were the ones who orchestrated everything that night. Alice felt the blood freeze in her veins. Why? Because I had just broken off my engagement to Victoria Hughes, the perfect candidate chosen by my family. Cassandra was furious when she found out that I was interested in getting to know you better. He continued, pulling more documents out of the folder. I found records of messages between Madeline and Cassandra planning how to get me away from you. They didn't intend for things to go that far, but when they realized I was genuinely interested, they drugged me, Alice added, her voice shaking. And then they abandoned me. Not exactly, Ricardo corrected, his voice laden with regret. They had a more elaborate plan. They wanted you to wake up disoriented, thinking that you had voluntarily gotten involved with someone at the party. The idea was that you would feel too ashamed to come to me afterwards. Alice stood up abruptly and walked over to the window. Her hands were shaking as she absorbed the information. What about you? Where were you when all this happened? Ricardo lowered his gaze. Cassandra put something in my drink too. Not enough to knock me out, but enough to keep me confused. When I finally managed to clear my head, you'd disappeared, and Madeline swore you'd gone off on your own. Why are you telling me this now? Alice asked, turning to face him. Because 3 days ago, when we met by chance, I saw our children for the first time. Her voice faltered. And because Cassandra is planning to return to Providence next week. She doesn't know that I found out the truth, or about the children. Alice sat down again, feeling the weight of the revelations. How can I be sure you're telling the truth? Ricardo took a final envelope from the folder. Because I have the written confessions of 3 Harrison employees who were paid to keep quiet. And because, he hesitated, because I did a DNA test with a napkin that Phoenix used in the cafeteria the other day. I'm the father, Alice. The silence that followed was deafening. Alice felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. I know I have no right over them, Ricardo continued softly, but I need you to know that I would never, not for a moment, have chosen to abandon you if I had known the truth. Silent tears streamed down Alice's face. They're all I have, Ricardo. They're my whole life. I know, he replied, his voice gentle. I'm not here to take anything away from you, Alice. I'm here to offer you protection, support, and, he paused, a chance to be part of their lives, if you allow it. Alice looked out of the window again, watching the clouds gathering over the mountains. Her defenses, built up over 3 years of loneliness and struggle, were beginning to show cracks. I need time, she finally said. I need to process all this. All the time you need, Ricardo nodded. But there's something else you need to know. Cassandra found out that I'm in Denver. If she finds out about the children, she won't, Alice interrupted firmly. I won't let her anywhere near my children. Our children, Ricardo corrected gently. And I agree. That's why we need to have a plan. When Alice left the hotel an hour later, she was carrying not only the briefcase with the evidence, but also the weight of a truth that would change the course of their lives forever. In the sky, the first drops of rain were beginning to fall, as if the universe itself were crying with her. Washington Park was particularly quiet that Sunday morning. Alice watched the triplets playing in the playground, her heart torn between fear and hope. Ricardo was sitting next to her on the bench, keeping a respectful distance, also watching the children. Phoenix has his way of analyzing everything, Alice commented softly, breaking the tense silence. He spends hours watching ants, trying to understand how things work. Ricardo smiled, noticing how the little one methodically examined each step of the slide before climbing up, just like my grandfather. He was a physicist, always taking watches apart to understand their mechanisms. And Aurora, Alice continued, she looks after everyone. Just yesterday she made Phoenix and Luna sit down so she could check if they had a fever, just because they sneezed. Like my mother, Ricardo whispered, his voice laden with emotion. She was a doctor before what? Before Cassandra was born. Our family forced her to give up her career. His face hardened at the memory. Maybe that's why Cassandra became so controlling. She grew up watching our mother lose her identity. Alice absorbed the information in silence, watching Luna, who was now dancing alone under a tree, talking to imaginary friends. And Luna? Ricardo asked. She's always been so dreamy? Yes, she lives in her own magical world. Sometimes I worry, but the therapist at the nursery says it's normal. She processes her emotions through her imagination. A sudden scream interrupted the conversation. Phoenix had fallen off the swing, and before Alice or Ricardo could react, Aurora was already at her side with her toy first aid kit. Calm down, Phoenix. I'll take care of your wound, Aurora declared solemnly, as Luna ran to get help from the adults. Ricardo stood up instinctively, but Alice stopped him with a gentle gesture. Watch, she murmured. Aurora wiped her brother's scratched knee with the wet wipes she always carried, applied a band-aid with drawings of dinosaurs, Phoenix's favorite, and kissed the bandage. There, now it'll heal faster. You taught her that? Ricardo asked, impressed. No, Alice smiled. She learned on her own by watching how I looked after them. Aurora has a natural gift for caring for others. Ricardo sat down again, visibly moved. Alice, I know it's early, but can I be part of these moments? Alice took a deep breath, considering her words carefully. We need to go slowly, Ricardo. They're too small to understand all the complexity of the situation. Of course, of course. He nodded quickly. Can we start as a friend of the family? Before Alice could answer, Luna approached them, her curious eyes fixed on Ricardo. You have eyes like Phoenix, she declared with the honesty typical of a 3-year-old. Ricardo froze, looking at Alice for guidance. She nodded slightly, giving him permission to interact. Is that so? He replied gently. What an interesting coincidence. Do you like stories? Luna asked, already preparing to share one of her fantastic narratives. I love stories, Ricardo smiled, especially magical ones. Luna lit up at this answer, and began to tell him about a fairyland that existed inside her music box. Ricardo listened attentively, asking questions at the right moments and reacting with genuine interest. Gradually, Phoenix and Aurora also approached, attracted by their sister's story and the kind stranger's attention. Phoenix was especially interested when Ricardo mentioned that he knew about constellations, and Aurora was impressed when he praised her medical care for her brother. Alice watched the interaction with a lump in her throat. It was surreal to see her children interacting with their father without knowing who he was, to see how naturally they connected with him. "Mom," Aurora called after a while, "can we have ice cream? Can the new friend come too?" Alice exchanged a meaningful glance with Ricardo. "Yes, he can come, if he wants." "I'd be honored," Ricardo replied, his voice laced with emotion. At the ice cream parlor near the park, Alice watched as Ricardo naturally helped Phoenix wipe the ice cream off his face, as he laughed at Luna's pointless jokes, and as he patiently answered Aurora's 1,000 questions about his profession. "Do you work in a big office?" Aurora asked, licking her strawberry ice cream. "Yes, but you know what?" Ricardo leaned in as if to tell her a secret. "Sometimes I'd rather be playing in the park, like you." The children laughed, and Alice felt something change inside her. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for more love in her children's lives. As the afternoon drew to a close, Ricardo said goodbye to the children with high fives and smiles. "Alice," he called softly when the children became distracted, "thank you for today. It was more than I could have hoped for." "They liked you," she admitted. "But Ricardo, we need to be sure about Cassandra. I can't risk—" "I know," he interrupted her. "I've already made some arrangements. Can we talk about it tomorrow?" Alice nodded, watching as he took one last look at the children before leaving. That Sunday had changed something fundamental in their family dynamic, and although there was still a lot of fear and uncertainty for the first time in 3 years, Alice allowed herself to feel a small glimmer of hope. The Morrison & Associates law firm occupied the entire 20th floor of a modern building in downtown Denver. Alice nervously adjusted her blouse as she followed Ricardo through the glass doors. It was Monday, and the children were safe at daycare, allowing her to finally learn about the plan Ricardo had mentioned. "Catherine is waiting for us," Ricardo explained, leading her into a private conference room. "She's more than my lawyer. She's one of the few people I really trust." Catherine Morrison was a middle-aged woman with gray hair and piercing eyes behind gold-framed glasses. Her handshake was firm as she greeted Alice. "So you're the famous Alice," Catherine smiled, indicating the chairs. "Ricardo spent the whole weekend updating me on the situation. We need to discuss Cassandra," Ricardo began, his tone becoming serious. "She arrives in Providence next week, and I have reason to believe that she is already investigating my presence in Denver." Catherine opened a folder on the table. "We've managed to trace some suspicious activity. Your sister has hired a local private investigator." Alice felt her stomach turn. "Does she know about the children?" "Not yet," Catherine assured her, "but it's only a matter of time. That's why we need to act preventively." Ricardo leaned forward. "Alice, I know it's a lot to process, but Catherine has developed a legal strategy that can protect us, you and the children, from any interference from Cassandra." "How?" Alice asked, her voice trembling slightly. Catherine began to explain. "First, we will legally establish Ricardo's paternity. This will give us a basis for requesting protective measures, if necessary. Then we can structure a custody agreement that protects your rights as a mother, while allowing Ricardo to assume his responsibilities as a father. But the most important thing," Ricardo interrupted gently, "is that we're going to expose Cassandra and Madeline's actions from that night. Catherine has already gathered enough evidence for a criminal prosecution." Alice paled. "Criminal? What they did to the two of you amounts to several crimes," Catherine explained. "Non-consensual administration of substances, conspiracy, abandonment of an incapacitated person." "I don't want to relive all that publicly," Alice protested. "The children, we won't have to," Ricardo assured her. "Catherine suggests using the evidence as leverage. Once Cassandra knows we have concrete proof, she won't dare interfere in our lives." Alice absorbed the information in silence, her hands intertwined on her lap. What if she doesn't care? What if she decides to go public anyway? Then she'll fall for it, Catherine replied firmly. Ricardo has already taken steps to protect his business interests from any scandal. The only one who has anything to lose is Cassandra. "There's one more thing," Ricardo added, exchanging a meaningful glance with Catherine. "We've discovered that Cassandra has secrets of her own. secrets that the Delgado family would do anything to keep buried. Catherine slid another folder across the table. Alice opened it hesitantly, her eyes widening as she read the documents. "This is," she murmured. "Yes," Ricardo confirmed. "Cassandra has been embezzling money from the company for years, millions in offshore accounts. If this comes to light, it's not just her freedom that will be at risk, but the entire reputation she holds so dear." Alice closed the folder, feeling nauseous. Why would she do all this? "Power," Ricardo replied simply. "It's always been about power. Controlling the family, controlling the company, controlling my life. And now we have a choice," he said softly. "We can use this information to keep her at bay, or we can expose everything." Catherine added, "The choice is yours, Alice. Ricardo has already made it clear that he will abide by your decision." Alice stood up and walked over to the window. Downstairs, Denver continued her frenetic pace, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that room. "The children," she said at last. "Everything we do has to be with them in mind." "Always," Ricardo agreed, joining her at the window. "I promise I'll protect them, Alice. All of you." Catherine sniffled softly. "There's something else we need to discuss." "Ricardo?" He nodded, turning to Alice. "I want to transfer part of my shares in the company to a trust fund in the children's name. Whatever happens between us, I want to ensure that they have a secure future." "Ricardo, I don't need your money," Alice began. "It's not about money," he interrupted her gently. "It's about giving them every opportunity we can. Don't you think Phoenix would love to go to that science school we saw? Or that Aurora deserves the chance to fulfill her dream of becoming a doctor one day?" Alice felt tears forming in her eyes. "And Luna? Luna will have all the art and music lessons her creative heart desires," he smiled. Catherine watched the interaction with professional and personal interest. "We need to finalize some documents today if possible. Cassandra could arrive in Providence at any moment." Alice took a deep breath, returning to the table. "What do I need to sign?" As Catherine explained the legal details, Alice felt a strange peace settle in her heart. For the first time since that fateful night, she was no longer alone in the fight to protect her children. "One last thing," Ricardo said when they had finished. "I'd like to continue seeing the children as we did yesterday. No rush, in your own time." Alice nodded. "They asked about you this morning. Luna said you tell stories better than the teacher." Ricardo laughed, but his eyes shone with emotion. "Tomorrow is astronomy day at the planetarium. Maybe Phoenix would love that," Alice added, a small smile forming on her lips. When they left the office, the afternoon sun was painting the Colorado sky in shades of pink and gold. Alice knew there was still a lot to sort out, but for the first time in 3 years, the future didn't seem so daunting. Denver's planetarium glowed under the morning sky as Alice helped the triplets out of the car. Ricardo was already waiting for them at the entrance, holding 3 small packages wrapped in starry paper. "You didn't have to bring presents," Alice whispered as the children ran towards her. "They're just educational kits about astronomy," he replied with a shy smile. "I thought Phoenix especially." "Look, Mom," Phoenix exclaimed, tearing open the wrapping to reveal a small portable telescope. "Can I see the stars with this?" "Of course." Ricardo squatted down to his level. "And you know what? Today we're going to learn about all the constellations you can find with it." Aurora had already opened her present, an illustrated book about the solar system with special pages that glowed in the dark. Luna was hugging a miniature planetarium that projected stars onto the ceiling. "It's like magic," Luna whispered, her eyes shining with enchantment. The session in the planetarium was magical. The children sat between Alice and Ricardo, their little heads tilted back as they watched the universe unfold above them. Phoenix bombarded the presenter with questions about black holes, while Aurora took careful notes in her new space research diary. "Look, Daddy, that star looks like a diamond," Luna exclaimed naturally, making everyone freeze. The silence that followed was deafening. Alice felt her heart stop while Ricardo seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. "Luna, darling," Alice began softly, but Ricardo touched her arm gently. "It's all right," he murmured, his voice laced with emotion. "If it's all right with you." Alice watched her daughter's face, so innocent and full of expectation, and then looked at the other two who were now watching the scene with curiosity. Perhaps the moment was right. Perhaps the universe was giving them a sign. "Children," she said softly, "there's something that Mom and Richard need to talk to you about." After the session, they sat on a bench in the planetarium garden. The autumn sun warmed gently as Alice chose her words carefully. "You know that all families are different, right? she began. Some have just mom, some just dad, some have both. Like Sophie's family, Aurora interrupted, referring to her friend from nursery school. Exactly, Alice smiled. Well, our family is growing. Ricardo? He's your father. Phoenix frowned, studying Ricardo intensely. Is that why we have the same eyes? Ricardo nodded, unshed tears shining in his eyes. Yes, champ. That's why. And why weren't you with us before? Aurora asked directly, her protective nature emerging. Because, Ricardo hesitated, looking at Alice for guidance. Because sometimes adults make mistakes, Alice added. But the important thing is that he's here now, and he wants to be part of our family. Luna, who had been surprisingly quiet, approached Ricardo. Are you going to tell us stories every night? Whenever you want, he promised, his voice trembling. And will you take us to see more stars? Phoenix added hopefully. All the stars in the universe. Aurora still looked hesitant. Are you going to make mommy cry? The question hit Ricardo like a punch in the gut. No, darling, never. I promise I'll do everything I can to see your mother smile. Alice wiped away a furtive tear, impressed by her little protector's perspicacity. Group hug, Luna declared suddenly, throwing herself on Ricardo. Phoenix followed immediately, and after a moment's consideration, Aurora also joined in the hug. Alice watched the scene, her heart overflowing with contradictory emotions. It was beautiful and frightening at the same time to see her children accepting this new reality so naturally. Mommy too, Luna called out, holding out her hand. Hesitantly, Alice approached, allowing herself to be pulled into the collective embrace. The warmth of her children's small bodies mixed with Ricardo's solid presence created a strangely comforting sensation. Later, as the children played in the nearby playground, Ricardo approached Alice. Thank you, he said simply. I know I didn't have to do that today. They have a right to know, she replied. And after everything we've discovered about Cassandra, we need to stand together to protect them. Alice, Ricardo hesitated. There's something else I need to tell you. I got a message from her this morning. She's coming to Denver. Alice felt her blood run cold. When? Tomorrow. But don't worry. Catherine's already... Mom! Daddy! Phoenix shouted from the slide. Come and see what I've found. The natural use of the word daddy made them both smile despite their worry. We'll deal with Cassandra tomorrow, Ricardo said softly. Today, I just want to be a father. Alice nodded, watching as he ran to see Phoenix's new discovery. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with the same colors they had seen in the planetarium. It was a new chapter in their lives, full of promise and danger. But for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. They had become a family, albeit an unconventional one, and together they would face any storm that came their way. Mom, Luna called out. Come and see the stars starting to come out. Alice smiled, joining her family under the sky that was beginning to fill with stars. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for today, this moment was just perfect. The Brown Palace Hotel was buzzing with its usual elegance when Cassandra Delgado walked through the lobby, her Christian Louboutin heels echoing on the marble floor. Her impeccable Chanel suit and regal posture emanated power and control, just the way she liked it. In the hotel restaurant, Ricardo was waiting for her alone, as agreed. What Cassandra didn't know was that Catherine Morrison occupied a discreet table in the corner, and Alice watched everything from a room on the second floor, via a camera system installed with the hotel's permission. Dear brother, Cassandra smiled, that smile that never reached her eyes. What a surprise to find you in Denver. Business? You know very well why I'm here, Cassandra, Ricardo replied coldly, indicating the chair in front of her. Oh? She arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow. And why would that be? Because your private investigator isn't as discreet as you thought. Cassandra's smile faltered for a moment. In the second-floor bedroom, Alice clasped her hands nervously as she watched the scene unfold. I don't know what you're talking about. Cassandra regained her composure. I came to Denver just to find out about Alice and the children, Ricardo interrupted, his voice controlled but sharp. Cassandra's face paled slightly. Children? My children, Cassandra. The triplets who were born 9 months after that night you and Madeline decided to play God with our lives. Ricardo, darling. Cassandra tried to keep control. That girl is obviously trying to manipulate you. How can you be sure that I have all the DNA tests? He cut her off again. Just as I have all the proof of what you and Madeline did that night. In the bedroom, Alice watched Cassandra visibly lose color. Catherine, from her observation post in the restaurant, discreetly activated a small tape recorder. "Don't be ridiculous," Cassandra hissed. "You have no proof of anything." Ricardo opened his briefcase and began laying out documents on the table. Statements from the Harrison employees, toxicology results, records of messages between you and Madeline. "Do you want me to continue?" "This is absurd." Cassandra tried to get up, but Ricardo grabbed her wrist. "I'm not finished yet." His voice was pure ice. "I also have proof of your financial activities over the last 5 years. Interesting how so much of the company's money ended up in accounts in the Cayman Islands, isn't it?" For the first time in her life, Cassandra Delgado looked genuinely scared. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear from my life and the life of my family. Completely." "Family?" She laughed bitterly. "That girl and her bastards aren't—" "Watch your words," Ricardo interrupted, his voice dangerously low. "It's my children you're insulting." In the bedroom, Alice felt silent tears streaming down her face, impressed by Ricardo's protective ferocity. "What if I refuse?" Cassandra challenged. Ricardo slid one last envelope across the table. "Then this complete dossier goes to the police, the company board, and of course, our parents." "You wouldn't do that," she whispered. "You'd destroy the family name." "No, Cassandra. You already did that when you decided to destroy innocent lives for power and control." A heavy silence settled between the brothers. Catherine watched intently, ready to intervene if necessary. "How much?" Cassandra finally asked. "I don't want your money," Ricardo replied. "I want your resignation from the company and your word that you will never come near me or my family again. And if I happen to meet your precious children?" She smiled mischievously. Ricardo leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "Then the dossier goes straight to the press. I don't imagine prison would suit Chanel very well." In the bedroom, Alice watched Cassandra visibly deflate. The mask of control finally broke, revealing the true face of fear. "You choose, sister," Ricardo continued. "Your freedom and reputation, or your sick obsession with control." Cassandra picked up the documents with trembling hands, studying them briefly. "You win," she finally whispered. "But know that I will never forgive this betrayal." "I don't need your forgiveness," Ricardo replied calmly. "Only your absence." As Cassandra got up to leave, Ricardo added, "Your resignation papers will be with Catherine tomorrow. Sign them and disappear." Alice watched Cassandra cross the hotel lobby like a retreating hurricane. Minutes later, Ricardo entered the room, looking emotionally exhausted. "Is it over?" she asked softly. "Almost," he replied, sitting down heavily. "Catherine will make sure she keeps her end of the bargain." Alice approached hesitantly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I'm sorry you have to choose between your sister and—" "No," he interrupted her gently. "Don't be. Cassandra made her choices a long time ago. I just took too long to see the truth. Are the children safe now?" "They are," he assured her, covering her hand with his. "We all are." At that moment, Alice's cell phone rang. It was Mrs. Martinez. "The little ones are asking if they can have pizza for dinner tonight," the lady informed her affectionately. "Something about celebrating the stars they saw yesterday." Alice looked at Ricardo, a small smile forming. "Pizza sounds perfect. Can we pick them up in half an hour?" "Us?" Ricardo asked hopefully. "Yes," she replied softly. "Us." As they left the hotel, the sun was beginning to set over Denver, painting the sky with shades of hope. A page had been turned, a dark chapter finally closed. What came next would be written not with fear and secrets, but with love and truth, and maybe, just maybe, with a little magic from the stars that Phoenix loved so much to watch. The morning began with the sound of Alice's apartment doorbell. It was too early for visitors and the children were still asleep. When she opened the door, her heart froze. Madeline was standing there, as elegant as the last time she had seen her in Providence, 3 years ago. "Hello, Alice." Madeline smiled. That same fake smile that had fooled Alice so easily before. "Can we talk?" "We have nothing to talk about," Alice replied coldly, trying to close the door. "Not even about how Cassandra is destroyed? Or about how you manipulated Richard to get what you wanted?" Alice felt a wave of anger rise in her chest. "How dare you?" "Mom?" Aurora's sleepy voice came from the hallway. "Who is it?" "No one important, dear. Go back to bed." But Aurora, ever protective, approached the door. Madeline looked at the girl with a calculating interest that made Alice want to protect her daughter like a lioness. "Come in," Alice said abruptly. "But if you say a single word that upsets my children, don't worry, Madeline smiled. I just want to clarify a few things. Aurora, sensing the tension, rushed to wake up her siblings. Alice knew she had to deal with Madeline quickly. In the small living room, Madeline looked at the pictures of the triplets on the wall. They look just like Ricardo, she commented casually. What do you want, Madeline? I want you to understand that you're destroying lives, she replied, turning to face Alice. The Delgado family is in chaos. Cassandra reaps what she sows. A male voice interrupted. Ricardo was standing in the doorway that Alice had left ajar, Catherine Morrison at his side. Ricardo? Madeline paled. How? Security system, he explained coldly. Installed after Cassandra showed up. I was alerted the moment you entered the building. Catherine stepped forward, placing a folder on the coffee table. Ms. Peterson, I believe we have some unfinished business to discuss. I have nothing to discuss with you. Madeline tried to maintain her composure. On the contrary, Catherine smiled humorlessly. We have your audio-taped confession courtesy of Cassandra. Apparently, she decided she wouldn't go down alone. Alice watched Madeline visibly crumble. In the hallway, 3 curious little faces peered at the scene. Children, Ricardo called softly. How about we go for breakfast at the pancake house? But Daddy, Phoenix protested. Who is that girl? Someone who's already leaving, Alice replied firmly. Madeline looked at the children, then at Ricardo, and finally at Alice. You won, didn't you? You got everything you wanted. No, Alice replied, her voice trembling with restrained emotion. I lost 3 years with my children having a father. I lost my trust in people. I lost a friend I thought I had. Alice, Madeline began. No, now you're going to listen to me. Alice interrupted, years of hurt overflowing. You were my best friend. I trusted you, and you betrayed me in the worst possible way. Ricardo approached, placing a protective hand on Alice's shoulder. Catherine, please take the children to breakfast. Alice and I need to sort this out. Catherine nodded, gently guiding the triplets out of the apartment, promising pancakes with extra chocolate syrup. When they were alone, Madeline collapsed on the sofa. You don't understand. Cassandra, she had so much power. She promised. Promised what? Ricardo asked harshly. Money? Social position? A better life, Madeline whispered. Far from the mediocrity she said I deserved. Alice felt a mixture of pity and disgust. And that justified destroying my life? We never intended it to go this far, Madeline protested weakly. It was just to keep the two of you apart. But then you got pregnant and Cassandra said we had to protect the family's reputation. Protect? Ricardo exploded. You call abandoning a drugged woman protection? Ricardo, Alice touched his arm gently. It's not worth it. Madeline watched their interaction with tears in her eyes. You really love each other, don't you? After everything. We love our children, Alice corrected. The rest we're discovering day by day. Catherine returned at that moment, alone. The children are with Mrs. Martinez in the restaurant. Madeline, I suggest you come with me to my office. We have documents that need your signature. And if I refuse, then the police will be very interested to hear about your activities that night, Catherine replied calmly. Madeline stood up, defeated. At the door, she stopped and looked at Alice one last time. I'm sorry, she said softly, for everything. When the door closed, Alice collapsed into Ricardo's arms, letting the tears finally fall. Years of hurt, betrayal, and fear being released. It's over, he whispered into her hair. It really is over. The children, she began. They're safe. We're a family now, Alice. No one's going to change that. She pulled away slightly, looking into his eyes. A family, she repeated softly. A family, he confirmed, gently wiping away her tears. Imperfect, complicated, but ours. Outside, Denver continued its normal pace, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. But inside that small apartment, something had fundamentally changed. The last shadows of the past had finally been confronted and vanquished. It was time to start writing a new chapter, a chapter of healing, forgiveness, and above all, love. Shall we go and get our children? Ricardo asked softly. Alice smiled through her tears. Let's go. They must be crazy with so much chocolate at this time of the morning. Let them enjoy today, he smiled back. We have a lot to celebrate. Hand in hand, they left the apartment, walking towards their future, no longer alone but together, as a family. 6 months had passed since the confrontation with Madeline. Alice's apartment, once cramped for 4 people, was now full of packed boxes and memories ready for the move. "Are you sure about this?" Ricardo asked for the 1,000th time, as he helped Luna wrap her planetarium in bubble wrap. "For the 1,000th time, yes," Alice smiled, watching Phoenix and Aurora argue over what color they wanted to paint their new rooms in the house Ricardo had bought in the suburbs of Denver. The house was a dream, a modern cottage with a large garden and, most importantly, an observatory on the roof that Phoenix had already declared to be his space lab. It had enough bedrooms for everyone, including an office for Alice, who had finally resumed her studies in child psychology. "Blue is better for studying," Aurora insisted, holding up her book on therapeutic colors that she had won from Ricardo. "But green is the color of aliens," Phoenix protested, hugging her telescope. "You could paint half of each color," Luna suggested dreamily, still absorbed in protecting her precious planetarium. Alice and Ricardo exchanged amused glances. This was how it was now. Family decisions made together, small conflicts resolved with compromise, love growing in the details of everyday life. "Mom," Aurora called out suddenly, her expression serious. "When are we getting married?" Silence fell in the room. Alice froze in the middle of packing books while Ricardo dropped the tape he was holding. "What do you mean, darling?" Alice managed to ask. "Well," Aurora began in her most clinical tone, "Sophie from my class said that when moms and dads live together they get married, and we're moving in together, aren't we?" Phoenix stopped her discussion of colors to contribute. "And can we be the wedding scientists?" "I want to be the ring fairy," Luna exclaimed, momentarily forgetting her planetarium. Ricardo approached Alice, taking her hand gently. "You know," he said softly, "our children are very intelligent." Alice felt her heart racing. "Ricardo, marry me," he said simply. "Not because the children suggested it, not because we're going to live together, but because these last 6 months have shown me that I want to spend the rest of my life building memories with you and our children." "Say yes, Mom," the triplets shouted in unison. Alice looked at her family, because that's what they were now, a real family. She saw the love in Ricardo's eyes, the expectation on his children's faces, and she knew her answer. "Yes," she whispered, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "Yes, for all the days of our lives." The explosion of joy that followed was chaotic and perfect. The triplets jumped and screamed. Ricardo kissed her softly, and for a moment, all the painful past seemed to disappear, replaced by the promise of a bright future. "Can we have a wedding cake with planets?" Phoenix asked hopefully. "And unicorns," Luna added. "And a first aid kit in the decoration," Aurora added, always practical. Ricardo laughed, hugging everyone together. "We can have all that and more." That night, after the children had finally gone to sleep, exhausted from planning the coolest wedding in the universe, Alice and Ricardo sat on the apartment's balcony, watching the Denver stars. "I thought I'd never trust anyone again," Alice confessed softly. "After that night, and I thought I'd never find anything more important than the company," Ricardo added. "Then 3 little miracles and your amazing mother showed me what really matters." Alice snuggled into his arms, thinking about how life could change. 3 years ago, she was alone and scared in Providence. Now she was about to move into a dream house with the man she had learned to love, and their precious children. "You know what's funny?" she muttered. "Luna was right all along." "What do you mean? Remember at the planetarium? She called you Dad before we knew how to tell you the truth. Somehow she always knew." Ricardo smiled, remembering that moment. "Our children are special." "They are," Alice agreed. Phoenix with her infinite curiosity, Aurora with her protective heart, and Luna with her magic, Ricardo added. The sound of small footsteps interrupted the conversation. Luna was standing at the balcony door, hugging her favorite blanket. "Can't sleep, Princess?" Ricardo asked softly. "The stars are very beautiful today," she replied, snuggling down between them. "They're dancing with happiness." Alice and Ricardo exchanged emotional glances. Soon, Phoenix and Aurora also appeared, as if they sensed that an important family moment was taking place. There, under the starry Denver sky, embraced and together, they were more than a family. They were a constellation of their own, shining with love, hope, and infinite possibilities. "Look, a shooting star," Phoenix pointed excitedly. "Make a wish," Ricardo whispered. But Alice, looking at her family gathered together, knew she didn't need to ask for anything more. Everything she had ever wanted was there, in that perfect moment under the Denver stars. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had transformed a night of darkness into a life full of light, and that, she knew, was the greatest miracle of all. Autumn was painting the Rocky Mountains in golden hues when the big day finally arrived. The Denver Botanical Gardens had been transformed into a magical setting that perfectly matched the triplets' dreams. Planets suspended among flowers, delicate crystal unicorns on the tables, and small decorative first aid kits scattered strategically, courtesy of Aurora. Alice watched her reflection in the mirror of the makeshift bride's room. Her dress was simple and elegant with little stars embroidered on the hem, a surprise from Luna, who had insisted that mothers need magic too. "Mom," Aurora entered the room, already wearing her sky-blue bridesmaid's dress. "I've brought you some Band-Aids in case you're nervous." Alice laughed, pulling her little doctor into a hug. "I'm fine, my love. Just thrilled." Phoenix appeared soon after, proudly adjusting his rocket-print bow tie. "Dad said the stars are perfectly aligned today. I checked with my telescope. And the garden fairies are dancing," Luna added, entering with her little basket of petals, a small pair of sparkling wings on her back. Mrs. Martinez, who had practically become family, came in to help with the last details. "Los niños están tan hermosos," she smiled, thrilled. "And you, darling, you look radiant." Outside, the guests were beginning to settle down in the garden. Catherine Morrison, now more than just the family lawyer, was organizing the last details with her usual efficiency. Ricardo was waiting at the makeshift altar, under an arch of flowers and small handmade planets that Phoenix had helped to create. His nervous smile turned into pure joy when the music started. First came Phoenix and Aurora, he carrying the rings in a small spaceship-shaped box, she with her decorative medical kit. Luna followed them, scattering petals and occasionally stopping to chat with her invisible fairy friends. Then Alice appeared. Time seemed to stop when their gazes met. 3 years of history, pain, redemption, and love crystallized in a single moment. "Mommy looks like a space princess," Luna whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, drawing emotional laughter from the guests. The ceremony was unique, like everything else in their history. The vows were written not only by Alice and Ricardo, but also included special promises for each of the triplets. "Phoenix," Ricardo began, "I promise to always explore the universe with you, answer all your questions about black holes, and never let your curiosity die out. Aurora," Alice continued, "I promise to always cherish your protective heart, support your dreams of caring for others, and keep an endless supply of magical Band-Aids. Luna," they said together, "we promise to always believe in your magic, listen to your stories about fairies, and never let the world dim your special glow." When it came time for the rings, Phoenix presented the little space box with all the seriousness of a scientist carrying out a crucial experiment. Aurora inspected the rings carefully, making sure they were clinically clean, and Luna blew fairy dust on them for good luck. "By the power vested in me," the celebrant smiled, clearly delighted with the unique family in front of him, "I pronounce you man and wife, and officially a family." The bride and groom's kiss was interrupted by 3 small bodies throwing themselves on top of them for a collective hug, causing all the guests to laugh and applaud. The reception was just as magical. The wedding cake was a work of art combining all the elements: fondant planets, sugar unicorns, and delicately hand-painted little medical symbols. "Look, Mom," Phoenix pointed excitedly at the evening sky. "The first star of the night. Make a wish." Ricardo smiled, hugging his now wife and children. "I don't need to," Alice replied softly. "I have everything I've ever dreamed of right here." Luna danced with her imaginary fairies, spreading her own form of magic throughout the garden. Aurora made sure all the guests were well hydrated and comfortable. Phoenix explained constellations to anyone who would listen. Later, when night fell, and the stars shone brightly over Denver, the family gathered in a quiet moment away from the party. "We're a constellation now," Luna declared dreamily. "What do you mean, honey?" Ricardo asked. "Each of us is a star, shining differently, but together we form something special." Alice and Ricardo exchanged emotional glances. Of all the truths spoken that day, this was perhaps the most profound. "And you know what's best about constellations?" Phoenix added, ever the scientist. "They last forever, and if any stars get sore, we have space Band-Aids," Aurora added, making everyone laugh. Under the starry Denver sky, the family, now officially complete, embraced once again. They were a unique constellation, formed not by the fate of the stars but by the power of love that had transformed a night of darkness into a lifetime of light. And so their story would continue, no longer as a tale of secrets and pain, but as a saga of love, redemption, and the magic that exists in every little moment shared. Because sometimes the greatest miracles are born out of the darkest nights, and the most beautiful constellations are formed by stars that choose to shine together. If you could change one moment in this story, what would it be and why? Think about how that change would affect the entire trajectory of Alice, Ricardo, and the triplets. Leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.